Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. The sea was unusually calm that morning off the coast of Newport, Rhode Island. Looking back, I should have recognized it as nature's cruel irony, the stillness before catastrophe. I was conducting a routine training exercise with my SEAL team, focused on underwater infiltration techniques. The gentle sway of our vessel, the soft hum of its engines, and the rhythmic splash of waves against the hull created an almost meditative atmosphere. I'm Lieutenant Cole Walker, and this is my account of how everything went to hell in just 12 hours. The first sign that something was wrong came at 8:47. Our radio operator, Miller, caught a fragmented transmission from Newport Hospital. The voice was barely audible through the static, but the panic was unmistakable. Multiple casualties, violent behavior, requesting immediate assistance. Then silence. I exchanged glances with my second-in-command, Bennett. In 15 years of service, I'd never heard that kind of raw fear in a professional's voice. Before we could process the implications, more calls flooded our emergency frequency. Police dispatchers, ambulance crews, civilian channels, all reporting similar incidents across Newport. "Sir," Miller called out, his weathered face tight with concern. "Coast Guard's reporting multiple vessels leaving Newport Harbor. Apparently, people are trying to escape something in the city." Through my binoculars, I could make out the distant shapes of boats streaming out of the harbor like ants fleeing a flooded nest. The sight made my skin crawl. Training and instinct told me this wasn't a typical emergency situation. I was about to order our vessel back to port when a priority transmission cut through the chaos. Naval Command was directing all available units to assist with evacuation and containment efforts in Newport. The words that followed chilled me to the bone. Unknown pathogen, extreme aggression, bite transmission. My team, 8 of the best-trained operators in the Navy, looked to me for direction. Their faces reflected the same mix of disbelief and determination I felt. We'd trained for countless scenarios, but this was different. "Gear up," I ordered, my voice steady despite the knot forming in my stomach. "Full combat loads. Treat this as a hot zone insertion." As we approached the harbor, the scale of the chaos became apparent. Dozens of boats crowded the water, their occupants desperate to escape. Through the growing haze of smoke rising from the city, I could see multiple fires burning. The wail of sirens competed with the sound of sporadic gunfire. We docked at a relatively quiet pier on the naval station side of the harbor. The familiar territory felt alien now, transformed by the sounds of distant screaming and the acrid smell of burning buildings. Petty Officer Harris, our team medic, immediately noticed something odd about the ground. Dark smears marked the concrete, fresh blood, dragged in long streaks toward the naval station's main gate. "Lock and load," I commanded, my rifle already up and ready. Standard stack formation, we moved to the command center first. The streets were eerily empty, yet we could hear chaos erupting all around us. Garbage and abandoned vehicles littered the road, papers scattered in the wind like urban tumbleweeds. The air felt thick with tension and the metallic scent of blood. We hadn't gone 2 blocks when we encountered our first infected. The woman, or what used to be a woman, was crouched over something in the middle of the road. The wet, tearing sounds made my stomach turn. When she snapped her head toward us, I barely recognized her as human. Her face was covered in blood, eyes glazed and feral. Her movements were erratic and disjointed, each motion defying natural human behavior. Before any of us could react, she launched herself at our point man, Mitchell. Her speed was incredible, inhuman. Rodriguez managed to get his rifle up, but she was on him in a flash, snapping at his throat with blood-stained teeth. Bennett's shot dropped her instantly, clean headshot. The sound echoed off the buildings like a thunderclap, and in the distance, we heard something respond. Dozens of guttural screams getting closer. "Multiple contacts!" Harris shouted, his rifle tracking movement in the shadows of a nearby alley. They're coming from everywhere. What emerged from the shadows defied everything I knew about human behavior. Men, women, even a few children, all moving with that same unnatural gait, all covered in blood and gore. Their eyes, God. Their eyes were like looking into empty wells, devoid of anything human. "Fall back," I ordered, my training kicking in despite the horror unfolding before us. "Defensive positions, conserve ammo." The next few minutes were pure chaos. We retreated methodically, dropping the faster ones with headshots while keeping the main horde at bay with controlled bursts. The infected seemed drawn to sound, swarming toward our gunfire like moths to a flame. Every shot we fired just attracted more of them. We made it to a police station, barricading ourselves inside just as our ammo began running low. The reinforced doors groaned under the weight of dozens of bodies throwing themselves against it. But the steel held. Inside, we found evidence of a last stand. Shell casings littered the floor and dark stains marked where officers had made their final defense. But there were no bodies, a detail that worried me more than anything else we'd seen. "What the hell are we dealing with, sir?" Miller asked, his voice barely a whisper as he reloaded his weapon. I looked at my team, their faces streaked with sweat and grime, eyes wide with the reality of our situation. Through the windows, we could see more infected shambling down the street, drawn by our earlier gunfire. The sun hadn't even reached its peak, and civilization was already unraveling around us. "I don't know," I admitted, checking my own ammunition count. "But whatever it is, we're not equipped to handle it. We need to get back to the boat, regroup with command, and figure out our next move." Little did I know, our next move would test not just our training, but our humanity itself. The police station's radio crackled to life, breaking the tense silence. Through bursts of static, we caught fragments of military communications. The National Guard was mobilizing, attempting to establish safe zones across Newport. But each transmission painted a bleaker picture. Defensive positions overrun, evacuation points compromised, units going dark mid-broadcast. "They're setting up at Rogers High School," Harris reported, jotting down coordinates from the scattered transmissions. "Sounds like they're trying to create a staging area for civilian evacuation." I studied the map spread across a desk, plotting the safest route. The school was about 2 miles north of our position. Under normal circumstances, we could cover that distance in 20 minutes. But these weren't normal circumstances. "Sir," Mitchell called from his position by the window. "You need to see this." The street outside had filled with infected. They wandered aimlessly, bumping into cars and each other, drawn to any sudden movement or sound. The massive bodies made any direct route impossible. "We can't stay here," Bennett said, checking his ammunition. "Every shot we fired getting in here probably drew more of them." I made my decision. "We move now? Light kit, essential weapons only. Miller, grab that police radio. We need to stay informed. Harris, check their armory for supplies." The station's armory yielded some ammunition and 3 riot shields, not ideal for mobility, but the protection could prove crucial. We distributed the supplies and gathered near the rear exit, a heavy steel door that opened into a narrow alley. "Listen up," I addressed my team, keeping my voice low. "We move fast, we move quiet. Standard leapfrog pattern. Bennett, you're on point with a shield. Miller and Harris, middle. Mitchell, your rear security. I'll coordinate our movements from the center. Questions?" Their faces were grim but determined. We'd trained together for years, faced death in various forms, but this was different. This wasn't fighting an enemy we understood. This was surviving against something that defied explanation. At my signal, Bennett eased the door open. The alley was clear save for scattered garbage and a single infected slumped against a dumpster. Its head snapped up at the sound of the door, but Mitchell's suppressed shot dropped it before it could make a sound. We moved like ghosts through the back streets of Newport, a city I'd known my entire career now transformed into an urban nightmare. The familiar sounds of civilization had been replaced by distant screams, sporadic gunfire, and the constant, unsettling moans of the infected. The first real challenge came at the intersection of Thames Street. A city bus lay on its side, blocking our planned route. Dozens of infected swarmed around it, some crawling through the broken windows, others clawing at something or someone inside. "Alternate route?" Bennett whispered. I checked the map. The next viable path would take us through the shopping district. Too many blind spots, too many potential traps. We needed to push through here. Then we heard it, voices from inside the bus calling for help. Harris tensed beside me. "Sir, we can't just—" "We're not leaving them," I cut him off. The mission was to help evacuate civilians. That hadn't changed. I quickly outlined a plan. We'd use the riot shields to form a wedge, creating a corridor to the bus. Harris would carry smoke grenades from the police station. Not ideal, but they might disorient the infected long enough for an extraction. Everything happened in a blur of controlled chaos. The shields locked together. We advanced as one unit. The infected turned at our approach, their bloodied faces twisting as they charged. The impact against the shields felt like being hit by a truck, but our formation held. Harris launched the smoke grenades, creating a gray wall between us and the bulk of the horde. Mitchell and Miller provided precision fire, dropping any infected that got too close. The noise drew more of them, but we'd committed to our course. I broke from the formation, sprinting to the bus's emergency exit. Inside, I found 3 survivors, 2 men and a woman, all wearing hospital scrubs, barricaded behind a row of seats. Their faces were streaked with blood and grime. "Lieutenant Cole Walker, U.S. Navy," I said quickly. "We're getting you out of here." "Thank God," one of the men said. He introduced himself as Dr. Russell, an ER physician. We were heading to work when everything went crazy. The hospital's completely overrun. We helped them out, integrating them into our shield formation. Dr. Russell's colleague had a sprained ankle, slowing our movement, but there was no way we were leaving anyone behind. "Formation tight," I ordered as we began our fighting retreat. "Harris, last smoke. Everyone else, weapons free." The next 2 minutes were pure adrenaline and instinct. We moved as one unit, the civilians protected in our center. Every shot had to count. Every step had to be precise. The infected pressed in from all sides, their hands clawing at our shields, their teeth snapping inches from our faces. We finally broke through, sprinting down a side street. Behind us, the mass of infected followed, drawn by our movement and the gunfire. The injured doctor stumbled, but Miller caught him before he could fall. "There," Bennett shouted, pointing to a maintenance garage. "Solid doors, multiple exits." We rushed inside, barricading the entrance while Mitchell and Harris cleared the building. The infected slammed against the roll-down metal door, but the industrial-grade steel held firm. As our adrenaline faded, Dr. Russell shared what he knew. The hospital had been one of the first places hit. Whatever this was, it spread through bites and took effect almost immediately. The infected seemed to operate on pure instinct, attracted to sound and movement, attacking anything that moved. I nodded, but my mind was already on our next move. We were now responsible for 3 civilians, our ammunition was running low, and we needed to reach the high school evacuation point. Through a gap in the garage doors, I watched the infected mindlessly throwing themselves against the building. "Sir," Miller approached, his expression grave. "You need to hear this." He held up the police radio, its speaker emitting a new transmission that would change everything we thought we knew about our situation. The radio transmission cut through the garage's stale air. "All units be advised. Newport Naval Station has been compromised. I repeat, Newport Naval Station is overrun. All military personnel are to divert to secondary evacuation points. Rogers High School evac point is no longer viable. City is being quarantined. No unauthorized personnel are to leave the containment zone." The message repeated once before dissolving into static. My team exchanged grim looks as the implications sank in. We were cut off from both our vessel and our primary evacuation route. "What's Plan B, sir?" Bennett asked, his voice steady despite the situation. Before I could respond, Dr. Russell spoke up. "The university. Brown has a satellite campus here with a helipad on the medical building. It's used for emergency life flights." "How far?" I asked, already pulling out the map. "1.5 miles east," he replied. "But the building's secure, keycard access only. I have clearance." It was better than nothing. I studied the map, noting that the route would take us through increasingly narrow streets. Tight quarters meant limited maneuverability, but also fewer infected to deal with at once. "Harris, ammo count," I ordered. The numbers weren't good. We had maybe 30 rounds each for our primary weapons. Few magazines for sidearms and 2 smoke grenades. The riot shields were dented but holding up. A metallic bang from outside made everyone jump. Through gaps in the garage door, we could see infected still throwing themselves against the building, driven by pure animal instinct toward any trace of life inside. "We need a diversion," I said, eyeing the garage's contents. An old tow truck sat in the corner, its tank nearly full according to the gauge. Next to it, several acetylene tanks were chained to the wall. Mitchell caught my meaning. "Sir, that explosion would draw every infected for blocks." "Exactly. But it'll draw them here, not where we're going." We spent the next 15 minutes rigging the garage while I outlined the plan. We'd create a fuel trail to the door, light it, then slip out the back as the infected swarmed toward the explosion. The narrow streets would work to our advantage. The infected would bottleneck themselves trying to reach the fire. Dr. Russell and his colleagues helped us gather supplies, showing a composure that impressed me. The female doctor, who introduced herself as Dr. Reeves, had served as an Army medic before medical school. She helped Harris organize our medical supplies while sharing what she knew about the infection's progression. "It's fast," she explained, checking bandages. "Once bitten, victims show symptoms within minutes. Fever, aggression, loss of higher brain function. One of our nurses got bit trying to help a patient. Within 5 minutes, she was one of them." "Any idea what causes it?" Miller asked. She shook her head. Labs were still processing samples when the hospital fell. But it's like nothing I've ever seen. The infected don't feel pain, don't stop until their bodies physically can't move anymore. Pure instinct, no higher reasoning at all." The third doctor, Parker, hadn't said much. He was clearly in pain from his ankle. But he worked through it, helping us gather tools we might need for the journey ahead. When everything was ready, we positioned ourselves at the rear exit. The plan was simple, but timing would be critical. Bennett, Miller, and I would lead with the riot shields in a triangle formation. Harris and Mitchell would guard our flanks, while the doctors stayed in the center of our group. "Once we light it, we'll have maybe 30 seconds before the tanks blow," I explained. "We move fast, we stay tight. No one stops, no matter what. Clear?" Everyone nodded. I could see the fear in their eyes, but also determination. We'd survived this long by working together. That wouldn't change now. I struck the flare and tossed it. The fuel trail ignited instantly, fire racing across the garage floor toward the rigged vehicles. We waited 3 heartbeats, then moved. The back alley was clear save for 2 infected that Mitchell dropped silently with his knife. We made it halfway down the block before the explosion hit. The ground shook as a massive fireball erupted behind us, followed by secondary explosions as the acetylene tanks went up. The infected reacted immediately. Every shambling figure in sight turned toward the noise and flames, drawn like moths to a deadly flame. We used their distraction to make progress, moving as quickly and quietly as possible through the narrow streets. For several blocks, the plan worked perfectly. The sounds of the burning garage masked our movement, and most of the infected were heading away from us. But as we approached the university district, we hit our first major obstacle. The university district loomed ahead, but reaching it wouldn't be simple. A massive pileup blocked our direct route. At least 6 vehicles had collided in a chain reaction. Smoke still rose from one of the engines, and the entire scene was crowded with infected wandering between the twisted metal. "We can't backtrack," Bennett whispered, noting movement behind us. "They'll be following the explosion soon." Through my scope, I counted at least 15 infected in the immediate area. Too many to engage quietly, and too spread out to rush past. We needed another way. Dr. Reeves tapped my shoulder, pointing to a partially open emergency door at the base of an office building. "These old buildings connect through the basements. The university used them for storage. If we cut through, we'll come up right behind the medical center. It was risky. Basements meant darkness, confined spaces, and limited escape routes. But our options were running thin, and the sounds of the garage fire wouldn't distract the infected forever. "Harris, lights?" I asked. He distributed emergency flashlights from his pack, standard rescue gear we'd grabbed from the police station. Not ideal, but better than going in blind. "Single file," I ordered. "Mitchell on point, Dr. Reeves guides. I'll take rear security. Weapons tight, sound carries underground." The basement access groaned as we entered, the sound making us all freeze. But no infected appeared. The air grew thick and stagnant as we descended, heavy with the smell of mold and decay. Our lights cast long shadows through the dark space, illuminating abandoned office furniture and decades of forgotten storage. We'd made it perhaps 50 yards when Miller's light caught something ahead that made him stop short. A body lay sprawled across our path, fresh blood still seeping across the concrete floor. Mitchell raised his fist. Freeze signal. Our flashlight beams cut through the blackness. The feeding sound stopped. A deep growl emanated from the shadows. 3 infected crouched over their victim, their faces and hands slick with blood. They turned toward our position, teeth bared and eyes reflecting our light like animals. The basement stretched before us in a maze of corridors and storage rooms. Dr. Reeves had explained the layout. We needed to follow the main passage past the old records room, through the boiler section, and into the utility tunnel that connected to the medical building. Simple route, but the darkness made every step treacherous. The infected charged. Mitchell met the first one with practiced efficiency, his knife finding the sweet spot at the base of the skull. Bennett caught the second with his shield, driving it back while Harris finished it with his blade. The third slipped past our defensive line. Dr. Parker stumbled backward, his injured ankle failing him. The creature's teeth snapped inches from his throat before Dr. Russell pulled him to safety. The infected crashed into a stack of metal shelving, sending boxes and equipment thundering to the floor. Miller's shot dropped it, but the noise seemed to fill the entire basement. From the darkness behind us came answering howls. "Move," I ordered. "Quick and quiet as we can." We pressed forward, passing the records room with its towering shelves of moldering files. Our lights revealed signs on the walls, arrows pointing toward the boiler room. At least we were on the right path. A scream pierced the darkness ahead. Human. Desperate. Close. "Help! Please, someone!" I raised my fist. "Hold position." The voice came from near the boiler room entrance, behind us. The infected howls grew closer. "Sir," Bennett whispered, "they're coming." Bennett, Harris, rear guard, Miller, Mitchell with me. Doctors in the center. We're not leaving survivors down here. We advanced methodically, checking corners and doorways. The screaming had quieted to sobs. Near the boiler room entrance, we found a supply closet with its door half broken. "U.S. Navy," I called softly. "Anyone alive in there?" "Oh, thank God," a woman replied. "I can't get out. They're everywhere upstairs." The door opened to reveal a woman in scrubs, pressing a bloody cloth to her arm. Dr. Russell recognized her immediately. "Rachel? From radiology?" She nodded weakly. "They overwhelmed the first floor. I've been hiding for hours." Dr. Reeves examined her arm. Deep cut from broken glass. Not infected. Gunfire erupted behind us. Bennett and Harris engaging the first wave of infected entering the records room. The sound bounced off concrete walls, creating a disorienting echo. "Multiple contacts," Bennett shouted. "They're flooding in." We needed to move. Dr. Reeves pointed toward a heavy metal door across the boiler room. "That's the utility tunnel entrance. It'll take us straight to the medical building's morgue level." The infected reached the records room. In the chaos of flashing muzzles and dancing shadows, I watched Harris go down. 3 of them caught him as he reloaded, dragging him screaming into the darkness. Bennett emptied his magazine trying to reach him, but there were too many. "Fall back," I ordered, the loss of Harris hitting like a physical blow. "Into the boiler room, move." We retreated through the maze of pipes and machinery. The boiler room was vast, filled with ancient equipment that cast monstrous shadows in our flashlight beams. Bennett took position behind a large pump, laying down covering fire as we made for the tunnel entrance. The infected poured in, office workers with flesh hanging from their bones, patients still trailing IV lines, medical staff whose scrubs were black with old blood. A scream made me turn. Mitchell was down, pulled behind a boiler by grasping hands. His flashlight spun across the floor, briefly illuminating his final moments as teeth tore into his throat. Another brother lost in seconds. "Sir!" Miller shouted from the tunnel entrance. "Doors sealed!" Dr. Reeves fumbled with her keycard, hands shaking as she swiped it through the reader. The infected were everywhere now, closing in from all sides. Bennett's rifle clicked empty. Above us, the ancient pipes groaned under strain. Decades of rust and neglect were finally giving way, weakened by the vibrations of gunfire and countless infected pounding through the basement. A massive pipe burst near Bennett's position, releasing a scalding cloud of steam. More pipes began to rupture, the pressure system failing catastrophically. We had seconds to make a choice. Steam filled the boiler room, creating a momentary barrier between us and the infected. Bennett scrambled back toward our position as pipes continued bursting overhead, the sound of screeching metal mixing with inhuman screams. "Get that door open," I ordered, firing controlled bursts into the steam cloud. Dr. Reeves swiped her card. The lock clicked and Miller yanked the door open as Dr. Russell helped Rachel and Dr. Parker through. "Bennett, fall back," I shouted. He was out of ammo, using his rifle as a club. Through the steam, I saw him turn to run. An infected in security armor tackled him from behind. More swarmed over him before I could react. "Sir, we have to move." Miller grabbed my arm as the ceiling began to collapse. We sealed the tunnel door behind us, Bennett's final scream cutting off with the sound of grinding metal. The utility tunnel stretched 50 yards ahead, ending at the morgue entrance. "Door ahead," Miller called out. "Card reader's dark." "Power's out," Dr. Reeves confirmed, "but there's a manual release." I spotted the lever and pulled with everything I had. Mechanisms ground in protest, but the door slowly rose. The morgue lay before us, emergency lights casting a pale blue glow over rows of examination tables. As we entered, Dr. Russell grabbed my arm. "Listen." In the silence, we could hear it. The soft sound of movement between the tables. Many of the sheet-covered bodies were stirring. "They brought the first victims here," Dr. Reeves whispered. "When we didn't know what we were dealing with." The nearest sheet rippled, an arm thrust out, skin gray and mottled. All around the room, bodies began to rise. "Elevator to the helipad," Dr. Reeves pointed across the room. "It has separate backup power, but—" A sheet flew off the nearest table as an infected lunged at us. Miller met it with his shield, the impact driving him back. More bodies rose, blocking our path to the elevator. "Get the civilians across," I ordered, dropping 2 infected with my remaining rounds. "I'll hold here." Miller led the doctors in a sprint between the tables. An infected in a torn lab coat grabbed Dr. Parker's injured leg, bringing him down. Miller turned back, but more infected were rising between them. "Keep going," Dr. Parker shouted, fighting as they dragged him under. His sacrifice bought the others precious seconds to reach the elevator. I expended my last rounds as Miller got the elevator doors open. An infected nearly reached them, but Dr. Russell swung a metal tray into its head, knocking it back. "Sir, come on," Miller called. I turned to run, but my boot slipped in a pool of blood. I went down hard. The infected swarmed toward me. Miller charged out of the elevator, firing his sidearm. The shots gave me the seconds I needed to regain my feet. We retreated together, backing into the elevator as Dr. Reeves hit the button for the roof. Through the closing doors, I watched the morgue dissolve into chaos. Dr. Parker's screams had stopped. "They're all over the building," Dr. Reeves said as we ascended. Hundreds of patients, staff. The infection spread through the hospital first. The elevator opened to the dark helipad. Rain had started to fall, making the concrete slick under our boots. No rescue in sight. "We still have that smoke signal from the station," Miller said, pulling the canister from his pack. I nodded, remembering the purple smoke designed for emergency rescue situations. Through gaps in the clouds, we could see helicopter spotlights sweeping the city. I triggered the smoke signal, and thick purple clouds billowed into the night sky. The wind carried it high above the building, creating a distinct marker against the darkness. "Any station, this is Lieutenant Walker, U.S. Navy," I transmitted on our radio. 4 survivors on medical center roof. Purple smoke signal deployed. Requesting immediate evac. A distant helicopter spotlight turned toward the hospital. The beam steadied on our position. "Lieutenant Walker, this is Army Rescue 37, the radio crackled. "We have visual on your signal. Hold position, 2 minutes out." Suddenly, the stairwell door burst open. Infected hospital staff poured onto the roof. They'd followed the sound of our earlier fighting. These ones were fresh, their clothes still wet with blood from recent kills. We had 22 rounds between us. I'd kept careful count since the police station. Each shot had to count. Miller took position behind a ventilation unit, picking his targets carefully. I put down 2 infected with precise headshots while Dr. Russell and Dr. Reeves helped Rachel behind our cover. The helicopter's spotlight grew brighter. Wind from its rotors whipped the rain into stinging sheets as it descended toward the pad. More infected burst through the stairwell door, drawn by the noise. "Conserve ammo," I shouted over the rotor wash. "They just need 30 seconds to land." Miller's shot dropped an infected nurse that got too close. I took down 2 more as they rushed our position. 15 rounds left between us. The helicopter touched down at the far end of the pad. Miller helped the doctors toward it while I covered their retreat. 10 rounds. 7. 4. An infected in blood-soaked scrubs reached for Miller as he got the last civilian aboard. My final shot took it down. "Lieutenant!" the crew chief shouted, extending his hand as more infected closed in. Miller and I made a break for it. The infected were just steps behind as we cleared the ground, the helicopter already lifting away from the pad. Looking down at Newport, I saw what 12 hours of infection had done to my city. Fires burned unchecked. Streets teemed with infected, but I also saw pockets of resistance, barricaded buildings where survivors still fought back. Harris, Mitchell, Bennett, Dr. Parker. They'd given their lives so others could survive. As we flew toward the quarantine line, I knew this was just the beginning. The infection was spreading, but humanity wasn't finished. Not yet. The helicopter banked east, carrying us into a darker world. Behind us, Newport burned beneath the night sky.